You are listening to Inspired Caring with Michelle Magner, episode number 159. Hello, welcome to Inspired Caring. I'm your host, Michelle Magner. If you are caring for an older family member, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I bring insight, tips, inspiration, and strategies to help you care for the people that you love without losing yourself along the way. Having cared for both of my grandmothers, I've helped manage everything from hospital stays, households full of belongings, to navigating senior living and end-of-life care. And I've worked in senior living as a result of that experience, serving my residents and their families as they've been on this journey too. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Inspired Caring. I am very pleased to have Jay Ramsden on the podcast today. He is the Empty Nest Coach. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate being here.
I went and checked out a bunch of your videos on TikTok. You are really present on TikTok. A lot of great wisdom and advice and tips and strategies and thought processes. So I thought it would just be great to come on today and talk about empty nesting.
Yeah, the thing that everybody sees coming but doesn't really expect it when it comes, right? It's one of those things where you know it's happening. One of those things in life, right? You have a child and you know 18 to 22 years later that the nest is going to be empty with the last one, depending on how many you have, right? You know, you can see it coming, but you just don't prepare for it.
People don't. I know we really haven't very much, and we're so focused on helping shape these human beings as they are becoming who they are to send them out into the world. Both of our girls are in college, and then we have a high school aged son who is very busy in marching band. So it just like hit me as we were talking the first call we had about how I feel like I have training wheels right now to what this could potentially look like. And my husband and I are not doing very good. We love each other. We enjoy each other's company, but we literally don't really know what to do with ourselves unless we're just going to go out for eat and then come home and watch TV. Like that seems to be how we're trending.
Yeah, the go-to.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where, okay, you have a vision. Like when you're in elementary school, you're like, okay, I go to middle school and then I go to high school, and then some people go to college, some people go into the military, some people go straight into the workplace. You see that from your parents. You know kind of what the path is, and then oh yeah, I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to have kids. Very clear timeline, very clear path for what is that supposed to look like here, particularly in the US. And then nobody ever like gives you the vision for like what happens when the kids are grown and flown, right? There's no vision at any point in our lives until we get to like right before it or right in the middle of it.
Absolutely. And we're in this weird decade where our new vision is trending towards retirement. Like, what is our retirement going to look like? What we hope we'll be able to do and what, see and travel. And we have this kind of fantasy building about what our retirement years could look like. And that it's just really struck me that I've got potentially 15 years before that vision. So what am I doing with myself now?
Yeah. I think you move the retirement vision up to now, right? You may not be moving to someplace different. It may not be taking all these huge trips, but doing some of the things. I mean, we're not guaranteed tomorrow, so why would we wait? I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. Is they're like, I'm gonna wait until the kids are grown and I'm retired, and then life starts for me. But it doesn't, or it shouldn't. It should start now. It should really start when the kids are in high school. I mean, we spend so much time moving around, taking the kids everywhere until they get their licenses. But that's when it should really start. Like, how do we start preparing ourselves then for later?
Yeah, that's brilliant. How did you end up in this position working with people who are empty nesting? I presume you have children.
I do. Yeah. A soon to be 26-year-old and a soon to be 24-year-old. Yeah. My daughter's birthday is this week, actually.
Oh,
So,
fun.
yeah.
So what
So
what what was the path that got you here?
yeah, so the path that got me here, people ask that all the time. Like, how did you end up with, being, calling yourself the emptiness coach and then coaching empty nesters? And so how'd you find your niche? And I tell them I didn't find my niche, it found me.
Okay.
Literally, the type of people who are coming to me were people who are my age and in the same position and who are really like looking at life from I've got a transition point coming up. Life's been good, but it's not like what I envisioned it would be, or either for myself or for, my partnership with my partner or spouse, or even for my kids. And I just want better. And it doesn't
Mhm.
mean better like I want to travel the globe, on private jets and go to all these famous places, right? It's no, it's but just a little bit better, like just something different. What do I want for my life over the next 20 years? And that's how people started finding me. And then I said, you know what, this is, no one's really talking about this. There are coaches who talk about, like the midlife moms or the midlife
Mhm.
dads. You see those hashtags everywhere, but there's not a lot of us who are actually saying empty nest, like literally a handful. If you go to Google, there's like five of us that
Yeah.
actually use the word empty nesting, which is a phrase actually I don't even really like because it means the nest is empty and everybody's sad, right? Which is not how it should be, and that's what happens.
Yeah, there is an innate negative implication almost to the phrase the empty nest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And some people say, well, I'm a bird launcher or I'm, open nest. And I came across something the other day where it was just, somebody had like a board. It said, I'm the parent of free range adult kids. I literally made a video about it and people love that. They're like, no, I'm a free range parent and my kids are free range, kids. The phrase I think that stuck with people was like, it wasn't like the kids are just gone, like out of the nest. It's like, no, they live in the same forest. They're still part of my flock. Right. So it's
Oh,
like, and people were like, that resonated so with so many people. I mean, literally to the tune of like almost like 40,000 likes on the video. Like it was one of those things where it's like, oh, this is something,
yeah.
right? People don't like the term empty nest. They're looking for something different. And so, yeah, free range adult kids or free range parents, people seem to like them, those two
Well,
terms.
I think especially for Gen X, I think we have had a lot of media over the last couple of decades that have hammered home that we were free range, latchkey kids.
Yes,
So
yes.
it means something to me as a Gen Xer. And then the idea that I think our relationships with our kids are different than the relationships that we have had with our parents.
100%.
Right? I feel like, especially with my dad, it was, you graduated. Okay. Godspeed. Hope to see you at Christmas. I mean, we have a little more connection than that. I think with our kids, we want to know they're in the same forest.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it wasn't like our parents didn't care for us any less than we care for our kids,
Right.
right? I see a lot of that happen in the comments and things come up around that type of topic. It was like, well, our parents weren't, sad. They may have been. There was just not a way for them to verbalize that to us because we were literally gone, right? We weren't connected via cell phone. We weren't FaceTime. All of the things that keep us connected even though we're apart. And so I
Mhm.
think people lose sight of that. Like that's the big change that's happened between our parents and our generation is that we were more connected to our kids just on a regular day-to-day basis through communication. And when then that disappears, something else fills that void, right?
Absolutely. Our girls that are in college, and it'll be interesting to see if our son is in the same, what he does. It'll be interesting to see what he does. But our girls that are in college call us several times throughout the day, potentially myself and or my husband. There's actually several videos on Instagram about it. Young ladies on the phone, like me when I'm trying to call my mom, walking from class to class on campus.
Nice.
So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
100%. My daughter did that. She was like, well, if I was walking by myself, I didn't want anybody to think I was just walking by myself. So I'd always call you. Right.
yeah.
Like just to like look like I'm busy, which I thought was interesting, right? I never would have thought about that. I don't think we would have thought about that walking around. right? We just walk to and fro class. We were trying to get to where we're going, but they were so connected to us, and they still are. I think obviously girls and boys are different, daughters and sons are different. My daughter talks to my wife a lot, but they're both in education still. So I used to be in it as well. They talk about classroom management and classroom stuff all the time. So they call frequently. My son and I text probably more than my daughter and I.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I think that like how the connections that we have. My daughter texts me when it's logistics. How do you do, X, Y, or Z? But when
Yes.
it comes to like work or, other kind of life stuff, it goes to my wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a lot of logistical things as well, like changing the filter on the sink or something like that, that we're also fielding those calls as well.
Yeah. Which I don't think we did as much when we were in life that way. We just figured it out. And how did we figure it out? We asked what's closest to us. And again, it goes back to the communication piece. We didn't have YouTube, we didn't have videos, we didn't have Google, we didn't have anything to ask anybody else besides our parents. And if we couldn't get them, we had to ask like a roommate or some other trusted person in our immediate circle.
I remember calling my grandparents with questions, like my grandmother about recipes, and that's actually something I recommend to people just to help maintain and facilitate connection. Is we can Google things and also just call your grandma.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, hashtag call your grandma. That should be something we start new, right? I think my daughter does that with my mom, which is great. Like she'll call or text just to check in, or sometimes ask questions of her about those types of things, which is wonderful.
I love
It's a
that.
good way to stay connected.
So when we're creating this vision for our relationship, for our home, for this next 10 to 15 years, the first thing I've already heard from you is don't wait. Like anything that you are daydreaming about, working on or towards or doing in retirement, start to pull those threads and weave them through now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't wait. And then the first thing is too is like really start to get I call it getting a handle on your heart and your head, which is really like getting a handle on your emotions and your thoughts about that time in life. Right? It pops up on my social all the time, the comments like actually the trouble people have with that transition, that life transition. And the very first step, even when I'm working with people in my practice, is like helping them get a handle on their heart and their head. It's like actually face your feelings and you deal with what's going on, because you can't get to the next step. You can't even start planning what comes next until you get right with what's happening now or what's going to happen. That's like step one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. So is that part of your sense of purpose? Is that what's happening with that?
Yeah, I think it's what happens is it's unraveling your self identity from
Oh,
being a parent 24/7, right?
yes.
So many people, myself included, I mean, I called myself Mr. Logistics earlier, right? That was my identity in the family. And when my kids launched within the same week, even though they were 2 years apart, they launched in the same week into their adult apartments. And so, like, one week was my daughter, the next week was my son, and then my Mr. Logistics just went boop and stopped. And so that was my self identity. I had to unravel myself from that. And that's true for moms or dads or whatever your role is in the family. When it stops cold.
Right. I'm absorbing that right now. Like within one weekend, the entire household dynamic, the energy in the house, the logistics are being taken care of, and then they're done. And then it's your own identity that takes the first hit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you think about it, right, obviously people identify with moms maybe having more trouble with empty nesting than dads. That's not true. I see dads who struggle with it as well, depending on the relationship with the kids. But when you're a parent 24/7 and it just comes to an abrupt end, right? They go off to college and you're expecting them to call, like your daughters call, right? But when they don't call every day, or when they don't text all the time, or when your sons definitely don't, they're worse at communications than the daughters are. You're like, what the heck? Like, what do I do now? Oh, I got to focus on myself. Are you kidding? I don't even know what to do with that.
The head and the heart. is the first step, just wrapping your head around it. And
It's really learning to be able to just process emotions. As humans, obviously we have emotions all the time, but most people don't know how to effectively process those and move through them,
mm,
which is why people get stuck in spirals, you know, get stuck in the river of misery, as some people call it. But and then the next part really is just like deciding who you want to be now that the kids are grown and flown. It's almost like self-discovery. It's like people tell you all the time, you do empty nest syndrome, the number one thing to fix it, people tell you is get a hobby. That's not where you start. You may end up there, but you don't start with a hobby. You start with getting your head and your heart right, and then you start figuring out who you are as a person now that you're not a parent. So, right, you're not the parent of your kids. You're
mhm.
Michelle, right? Who are you? Like, what does that mean to you? What do you want it to mean to you? Who do you want to be now? And then once you define that, then you can start figuring out what you want to do with the rest of your life, which is crazy, right? We ask that of kids all the time when they're getting ready to go to college. Well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Nobody asks that of us when we're in our 50s.
No, nobody's asking that of us in our 50s. And what's interesting is I'm wondering how often we're asking our kids, who are you? Like what's your identity? Because they're having identity shifts too as they're stepping away from the engagement that they had in high school
Mm-hmm.
or in
Mm-hmm.
university, like with fraternities, sororities, or I have marching band and show choir kids, athletic kids, like their identities. We're all in an identity crisis, Jay.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're called life transition, right? I think every life transition brings an identity crisis, right? Think about it,
Yeah.
right? You go to middle school, right? You have an identity crisis because you're now at the bottom of the totem pole from elementary school. You
Hmm.
get into high school, you have another chance to re rediscover who you want to be or add something new to your life, right? You have that opportunity. Not everybody takes that opportunity, but you have that opportunity. You go off to college, you have a chance to change your self identity again. You get married, you can change your self identity again. And you have kids, you can change yourself. Like it's a constant nonstop, which people don't often pause and say, well, who do I want to be in college? Who do I want to be when I become a mom or a dad? Who do I want to be when like I take this next job? We just do the next step, but there's no pause.
Right. So it's really not a crisis, it's an identity evolution through
Mm-hmm.
each of the transitions.
Correct. Yeah. One of my big things is just let life evolve.
Mm.
Yeah. And it comes from the idea, like if you look, people always say, well, this is a challenging time, right? And if you look at the word challenge, there's the three letters in the middle, LLE. If you take that out, the word is change. So there
Yeah.
is change that surrounds every challenge, and every challenge brings change with it. So for me, the LLE in the middle is let life evolve
Oh my gosh, Jay, you're blowing my mind. Yes.
because we want to put so many demands on what comes next. We want to like have the picture perfect family, picture perfect this, but why don't we just let life evolve for ourselves? Not for everybody else, but just for ourselves.
That is copyrighted by Jay, by the way, from Jay. So I love that. You've worked with so many people. And what are some of the common themes that are emerging? Have we touched on those, or is there a way to
Yeah,
articulate them?
I think some of the common themes we've touched on a little bit. Right? It's like a loss of purpose, a little bit of a self identity. We'll call it crisis, but self identity evolution.
Hmm.
Some other things are actually how do you parent when your kids are 18 plus? We don't ever stop parenting. Even our kids, like my kids are 26 and 24. I don't stop parenting. My parents don't stop parenting me, and they're in
Right.
their 80s, right? That's just how life works. But how do you do it when they're not under your roof?
Mhm.
Right? One of my favorite things, I think it's like a country song lyric. It goes like, I've taught you everything you know, but not everything I know. So there's this really kind of draw if in humans to be able to teach. And that doesn't stop. No matter how old you are as a parent, you want to keep teaching your kids.
What I find interesting is that I learn things from my kids because, especially, well, all of them really at every age, because they're
Mm-hmm.
exposed to different people and they have their own thought processes on how they interpret information. So it can lead to some pretty interesting conversations.
It can, but that's humans, right? We want to learn from each other.
Right.
I think now as our generation, the next generation after us, uh, are okay with learning from people who are younger, right? Where maybe our parents and the ones before them, maybe not like they had all of the knowledge,
Hmm.
because you couldn't get the knowledge any other way other than by books or talking to somebody. But now everybody has access to knowledge. So that changes who are teachers in our lives.
Absolutely. I think within the definition of knowledge, it is, I believe this to be true, it is receiving information and then applying it. Or maybe that's wisdom. I don't know.
Yep, there's a lot of information at our fingertips. There's obviously what you do with it becomes knowledge, and then I think is the wisdom piece.
So, as we are looking to shift identities, and appreciate that you said don't just go get a hobby because I'm in school. So, I guess maybe that's a hobby. It's never been in that kind of category. I'm
Mm-hmm.
creating what I'm creating for family caregivers. I have the podcast. I don't feel like these are hobbies, though. They're just interests. I don't
They're
know.
things that you do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it isn't really about the hobby per se. It's like, how do you fill your time? And
Yes.
that's where getting right with your head and your heart, discovering who you want to be now. And maybe it's the impact you want to have on the world, right? You spent, we'll call it 20 some years having impact on your kids. And that doesn't end, by the way, but direct impact on your kids for 18 or 19 years, that doesn't stop. It shouldn't stop. It should continue. So where do you put that attention, right? To have an impact elsewhere. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is
Mhm.
because I wanted to have an impact beyond just my kids. That's why I left education. I wanted to have an impact just beyond education. Like I wanted to have an impact in this world that was far reaching. And so that's how I ended up in coaching and talking about empty nesting and living your best life and all those good things.
And I feel like with a kid still at home, I generally want to be available for those times when he is at home.
Mm-hmm.
So it does feel like there's this pre-emptiness phase. It's not like we can just, I mean, we can do whatever we want. Let's be clear. However, I want to be home when he comes home from school or work or whatever. So I think the idea of just signing up to like be a volunteer somewhere feels a little intimidating. Like I don't know what it is about not wanting to commit to something longer term to help fill that time.
Yeah, not being able to commit to something other than your kids
Right.
is a topic that comes up a lot with people who work with me. It's like, but I still need to be available for them. Okay, that's great, but they're not in your home. They're at college. Maybe they have their own apartment. They're working. I understand you want to be available, but does that mean you can't go and live your life? Does that make you not available anymore?
Mm. I'm thinking about that, Jay. I'm not sure the answer. I think
Well,
they
let's put it this way, Michelle. Is it about availability or is it about being present?
being present. Like the time that I am with my kids or engaging, interacting with my kids, I want to make sure that I am present. But I'm actually not always available. Like right now, I am not available to take a call.
Yeah, yeah. But if some like when you hung up with me and something came up, you could be present for your kids. I think that's
Yeah.
the big differentiation is being available and being present. And maybe that's the transition, right? That people go through is like when you're a parent and the kids are young, you want to be available all the time. You have to be, right? So they're babies, they can't do anything on their own,
Mm.
right? As they're toddlers, they start to learn things. You're always available to them to help them. But then that should pivot into being present to help them.
Yeah. The kids are learning their way too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
as well in their new relationship with us. And it's so hard as we are empty nesting. I think what I'm finding a lot of people are experiencing is that some of that time is backfilled with this caregiver role. So it's like we've transitioned from caring for our kids to now caring for our aging parents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a big topic that comes up too for me. In conversation with clients, but on social too, and even in my own life. It was April of 22 when both of my kids launched, and then it was July of 23 when my mother-in-law moved in with us. So we had true empty nesting for maybe 12 months.
Right. And then the dynamic changed in your household again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's always going to change, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be. I'm going to go use that word again. Present for your own life.
So, what is one of the strategies that you share with your clients about how to either be present or um, move through this transition and change with a little more grace?
Yeah, a little bit more grace. So one of the things I try and get my clients to do is find time for themselves. When you're a parent and you're parenting 24/7, we always feel like there's no time for us, right? We're giving, 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 giving. And when we have a transition and somebody comes into our home, one of our parents or an in-law, we're giving, giving, giving. So we always say, well, I don't have time for me. So I really encourage them to find time for themselves. And oftentimes I say, figure out what that means, like bookending your day. Something that I do, that time is my time. So I have a bookend in the morning and a bookend at night. So don't mess with my morning schedule, my morning routine, and don't mess with my night routine. Right? That's for me, and I'll give it myself the rest of the day. And so for me, the morning routine is I get up between 5 and 5:30. There's meditation, there's reading, there's writing, there's journaling, there's thought processing, there's coffee, of course.
Of
Right?
course.
Of course, you have to. Right? There's walking, there's exercise. That's my time. And then I have a hard stop. I often get, you're going to bed now. And it's like 8:45 or 9, but that's my hard stop. And I can decompress for the day and I go to bed. The rest of the day can be up and down and all around, giving however I can give to people in their lives. But that's what I try and encourage people to do is like bookend your days. Have a solid morning routine and a solid night.
Well, and what immediately comes up for me is the fact that, especially when we have kids in our home, there's a lot of schedule that is organically in place with kids going to school, coming home from school, us going to work, coming home from work. And so once the kids are gone, it's like your schedule. And it's not just about the free time, but it's about the structure.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. How do you put structure in place? It's no different like in the summertime, back when we were little, and when we were kids, there was no nonstop structure for us. It was summer and they were like, outside and we'll call you when it's different. Right?
Yeah.
So what did we do with those times? We explored, right? We went out, we found people to hang out with, we played games, we did lots of different things. And I think that's where we need to transition back to is like it's our time to explore now.
I just bought roller skates.
Nice. Love it.
I just bought roller skates. I mean, one of the things that I'm exploring are what are the things that before age 8 just put a smile on my face. It was swinging, swimming, roller skating, putting on plays. There's so much movement and creativity that
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
things. And um, I see there's a guitar behind you.
Yes, I've been teaching myself how to play guitar. Yeah, the driving force was to be able to play guitar for my wife for her birthday last year. But I'm slowly picking it up.
Yeah. So it's really about the exploration of things maybe you used to enjoy or those wish list things
Mm-hmm.
that are accessible at every age.
Yeah, anything. And think about it, right? You only have a limited number of like summers left, right?
You're right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how are you going to maximize those summers, or how are you going to maximize each season? right? What would you do every quarter, right? Every season that you wouldn't normally do. Like if you do that and you're doing four things a year that you wouldn't normally do. Like you push yourself to do something in the first quarter of the year, the second quarter, right? The summer, the fall, the winter, spring, whatever, how you want to think of it. If you
Hmm.
push yourself to do something outside that your comfort zone, then you're enhancing your life. If you decide to do it once a month, that's 12, right? Let's say you have 20 more years on this planet. We'll just take a round number. Hopefully, it's much longer than that. But
Hmm.
20 more years on this planet, for me, that would put me at 76. But if I do something every single month I wouldn't normally do, right? That's 200 plus things I would have never have done in my life.
It helps us be interesting too, because I think one
Mm,
of the things that we're really lacking is connection with people, like a little bit deeper, more meaningful connection. And I'm
mm-hmm,
finding that my friendships are changing as I'm stepping into this phase because I have friends who are fully empty nested.
mm-hmm,
Their kids
mm-hmm.
are in the forest, but I am not. So I'm still in the thick and the throes of the high school schedule. And so there's felt like a little bit of a disconnect because we're just not really in the same place. But if,
Right, right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Not in the same place. And oftentimes, your friends are the parents of your kids' friends. Not always, but right? You have connections with people on sports teams or in choir or band or drama or whatever it may be. You meet people you like and you hang out with them.
hmm,
And then your kids go and live their lives and you lose that connection. For whatever reason, right? That connection dissipates
yes.
because your kids go on and find college friends. And so it's really like, how can you be good at meeting people? And I get this a lot from people who are like super introverted. Like, well, how do I do that? Like, how
Hmm.
do I meet new people? Like, you have to put yourself out there, but you don't have to do it in such a grand way with putting yourself like in a room of like 30, 40, 50 people. Just start to find something that you feel connected to and try and meet a person who
Yeah.
has that same connection. Like for me, it's like I found a hiking group. So I hike on Sundays. People I never knew before. I moved someplace new with my wife for a job. We've lived here 2 years. I haven't really met people, but now I have a group.
It is a rediscovery of who you are, what are your own interests, and then how do you connect with other people in that space.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know that for many people, this is such a hard chapter because it's big swings in emotions. So you started with this, which is really the head and heart tapping in. Um, but when we're launching, like literally, when my daughter was graduating from high school, my father-in-law, who had a terminal cancer diagnosis, was in the hospital, and we were planning the grad party, and also anticipating his
Mm-hmm.
potential end of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember driving to the hospital and just shaking and sobbing. Like this is more than my nervous system can handle. And I'm doing the work and I'm present and I'm here for it and I'm a coach and I'm listening and doing other things. But I just thought this is just too much. This swings of emotion with the delight for your children and pride, and then the sadness and fear with your parents. Um, I think is also what leaves this empty nest phase so vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, a lot of times people don't realize, right? Well, you talked about being a coach, but you're also a human. So give yourself some patient and grace right there, right? We're human beings, even though we are coaches and we have these skills that we're taught. But you can't have joy without sadness. It's the same continuum. Like it's the exact same line. It's not like joy is one place and sadness is another. It's the balance,
Mhm.
right? Life is 50-50.
Right.
50% positive, 50% negative. Joy, joy and sadness are on that same line. What the example you gave, like live that out, right? The joy of your daughter graduating
Mhm.
and the sadness of the passing of like a father, right?
Mhm.
So same continuum, perfect example.
So I guess the message is both things can be true
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. And it's okay just to be shaking and sobbing, and you'll find yourself on the other side.
I'm a big believer in processing your emotions by letting them out, even if that means like screaming in a pillow. But the more you hold them in, the worse that it becomes.
This is interesting because I realize I don't sing. Even just because I can't sing, so I don't sing. And so today, as I'm wandering around the house, I feel like I've just had some pent up emotion and I've been vocal, like, grunting. And what my dogs are just like, what is wrong with our human? Our human is broken. Well, I know that my peer group, our peer group, like I think many people are searching and they want to feel like there is hope in this next chapter and they want to thrive. They don't want to just feel like they're surviving or gutting out or waiting. I guess that's the other thing, is it feels like you're kind of just waiting,
Mm-hmm.
waiting for something to happen with the kids or the parents, but then we're missing out.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really, I know it's kind of cliche to be saying like you should be living your life, like actually live your life. But for a lot of people, that's hard because they've never actually experienced that because they've lived for others
Mhm.
instead of living for themselves.
Well, I mean, yeah, because a lot of people, I mean, even if people had the opportunity to go to college, you were on your own in this college-ish environment from age 18 to maybe 24, 25. And then a lot of people started having kids right away. I mean, we had our first kid at age 30, but I've changed over the last 30 years. I am not the same person I was when I first got married 25 years ago. So
Right.
it just is a discovery.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to think of it, goes back to what we were talking about before, is you haven't changed, you've evolved. Not that it's bad. I just sometimes people think that change is a bad thing. Whereas if you evolve, you just become a better version of yourself.
Right. A better version of yourself.
Right. And that's my goal is for everybody is just to evolve to whatever version of yourself feels good to you. Not to evolve like I've evolved or you've evolved or whatever it may be. Is like just take a chance. Take a chance and try something new. Right? Expand who you are as a human being.
I love that. How can people connect with you? What are the best ways, and what platforms are best to find you?
Uh, TikTok and Instagram are the two best. It is the dot emptiness dot coach. You can Google Jay Ramsden. I'll be the first one that pops up too.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah, it's not hard to find me.
Okay, you're around.
I'm around. I'm around. But yeah, if you Google the emptiness coach, it'll pop up.
Okay.
Instagram, TikTok, two places I spend time.
So what's your podcast?
So my podcast right now is called Intentionally Curious. So my
Intentional,
intentionally curious.
intentionally curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My podcast has had a history to it. And it started December 31st of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. Is what else do you do in the middle of a pandemic but start a podcast? And it was called
Sure.
Positivity on Fire. I was looking for positivity in the world and trying to make the world, a little bit more positive place. And then as I evolved, so did my podcasts.
Mhm.
And it evolved because my brain was evolving into being intentionally curious about everything in my life, everything around me. And that's how intentionally curious came to be. That's the history. But I love it. People are like, you should start something new, start a new podcast. But I like the history
Mhm.
because you can see the evolution of my brain from
Mhm.
the pandemic through to now.
Yeah, and piece threads of it make up who you are and how you came to serve who you're serving, and the
Exactly.
evolution of thought that is taking you to that next space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. I can picture my friends listening to this conversation and just nodding their heads, feeling the feels. We've talked about some common themes and strategies on how to thrive, not just survive during this transition.
Well, sometimes it is surviving.
Surviving.
Surviving. Yeah,
Coining a new
combine
term.
them together. Yeah.
Surviving. Also copyrighted by Jay. Any final thoughts or words for those people who are in that chapter of aging parents, empty nesting?
Yeah, my motto for people, which is my personal motto, is just every step has purpose.
Mhm. Every step has purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, thanks for walking with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it.